Hi, welcome to this video series entitled Creativity with DBPRO. The DBPRO game engine has many features for 2D and 3D games. You can even make regular Windows based applications for databases and tools for making architectural editing facilities, all sorts of things. But with this tutorial we're focusing on the creation of 3D environments. Now, one of the easiest ways to create a 3D environment for the DBPRO DarkBASIC professional programming language is to use the 3D World Studio. The 3D World Studio is a software package available via the TGC website. You can access it through the Create Games 3D World Studio link. There's a lot of features available in this software package and its price isn't too heavy. Now when I purchased it, it was roughly about £99, £100, but here you see today it is £31.99 or $49.99. Excellent. So what can it do? It creates 3D worlds. Now the feature set is quite large. We're not going to go into too much detail about all of its features. We're just going to run through this introduction. So we see here that it can do all sorts of using all sorts of engines. You can see it can be used in the Talk engine, Blitz 3D and other 3D engines as well. We've got a screenshot of the typical layout of the screen. We've got the 3D view here, top view. You can change the rendering mode of the views. Here we've got a more traditional wireframe view. Excellent stuff. This stuff is really good. It is one of the main tools that I use for creating architectural 3D environments. Let's have a look at some of its screenshots, shall we? Yeah, doesn't that look fantastic? So let's have a look at the features page just briefly, not too long. Got some modeling to do today, can't be spending too long looking at web pages. So, extremely fast object manipulation and drawing designed for efficiency. Select and texture objects or object faces. Now this is excellent stuff because the actual texture applications are generated for you. As you model your creations, the program will calculate the size of the textures to match and to line up and to tile across the entire world. So there's no need to focus too heavily on adjusting the scale and the size of the textures like you would have to do in a 3D modeling program such as Blender, where UV editing is a really manual process. Although there are generators for UV coordinates in the Blender runtime, the current DirectX export application in Blender does not support any other format other than UV map based formats. So we have the automatic UV mapping. CSG operations, we can carve shapes, hollow, make a shape in hollow. We can split shapes up and extrude. One of my favorite features is its ability to snap to a grid, so that you can just drag away and draw your shapes and it will snap it to the size that you set the grid at, without having to worry about whether two vertices are sharing the same position, without having to worry about whether the wall is the right height to touch the bottom of the ceiling and the top of the floor, without having to worry about how wide or how thin the object that you have selected is. You know that if the grid size is a certain size, the object is going to also be assigned that size as you drag. You can let's have a look at a few things here as well. Multiple undo levels, texture lock, yeah. New brush primitives including arches. Arches enable you to create arch-based objects where there's a nice curve, so you can make nice bridges or arch doorways or arch windows, like we have over here in this screenshot here. We've got the light mapping system as well, which we'll touch on a little bit later. Now, if you're not willing to make a payment for this package, there is also a free modeling tool that you can use with the DBPRO engine. And this tool was created by Evolve Software, and its name is Mapscape. Mapscape is a alternative to the 3D World Studio, and it is generally an all-round editor. It's slightly up to date with features compared to 3D World Studio. It has, for instance, a displacement tool where you can deform objects into nice organic shapes and bumpy shapes to create nice caves and interiors, something that's not found in 3D World Studio. And the light mapper has a few extra features. I have already purchased 3D World Studio, and I find it to be a little bit more comfortable for what I need. However, I still use the Mapscape software for creating certain objects that I can import into 3D World Studio anyway. Yeah, it's excellent stuff. You can download this. As you can see here, Mapscape is a simple, free to use map creation tool made with DarkBASIC Professional. So let's get on with the overview of 3D World Studio, and to do so we need to switch computers. We're going to go over to my Windows XP machine. Here is the layout. This is a constant layout for it. You just got the toolbar, the objects and texture bar, visibility groups or just vis groups, viewports, 4 different camera views, status bar, menu. I'm running the 3D World Studio 5.6 on a Windows XP machine. You can use the software on Windows 7, Windows Vista. I'm not sure if it works on Windows 8. I've not really got Windows 8, so I can't really say. Probably it could, but don't quote me on it. So this is the 5.6 version. You need to download the latest update when you install the software to make the most out of it and its latest features and stability. In the file menu we have the export and import options. We can take a look at what files we can export and import in the help documentation. I'll look into the file format section. We can see here that we can import the SMF model format, which is a format created specifically for this editor, where you can load models rather quickly and you can get them to work quite quickly. You've got the Microsoft DirectX format, which is what we use to import our models from, say, Blender or your 3D modeling program. And most importantly, we have the DarkBASIC object, which it cannot currently import. However, it can, which is the most important feature, export the DBPRO object format with all of your textures and light maps applied. So we have the edit menu, where we've got the typical edit functions such as copy paste, Control X to cut, Control C to copy, and Control V on the keyboard to paste. Now the important part of the edit menu is the select object, select subobject, select vertex, and properties. To begin, we'll just discuss the select object options. These correspond to the buttons on the toolbar that show red selection on a cube. We have the select object option selected by default, which we will now keep as we create a new object in the screen. By default, we will be able to create a box. We'll just simply drag from the top left to the top right and create our box. In the front view, we will drag the box by clicking the left mouse button, and we will resize it by dragging the top handle. We can go into this viewport here called the perspective view and take a look at what we have. If I click the right mouse button, I will be able to use either the arrow keys on the keyboard or W, S and A and D. I can drag the mouse as you would in various computer games. As this is how we can navigate the scene. Nice. You can also press the shift key as you move to move very quickly so that you can advance through a large area. You can press the control key as you move so that you can adjust the camera to take a good close-up of the fine details. We can maximize a viewport. To maximize a viewport, you press the F12 button on the keyboard. To minimize the viewport back to restore it to its usual size, you press the F12 key again. We can maximize the other viewports as well. In object select mode, we can select the objects and duplicate them. To duplicate an object, you drag it with the control key held down. You might find that if you click first and then press the control key, the object will not be duplicated. Hold the control key down first and then drag, then you will get the result you desire. I'll press the delete key and remove the objects by clicking them in the viewport and pressing the delete key. Now, sub-object mode. In this mode, we will be able to select sub-objects. So what are sub-objects? Sub-objects correspond to the DBPRO limb structure, whereby each sub-object in 3D Studio is a limb inside of the scene object in the DBPRO file. We can click the sub-objects that make up this cube simply by left-clicking in the 3D viewport. Sub-objects can have their own textures. I'll click the texture list and select a different texture and press the apply button. Below the texture edit selector, we have a series of properties that we can apply to the face. Here we have the scale property, which enables me to increase or decrease the scale of the image. I'll enter a value of 2. On this edge, on this face here, I'll enter a value of 0.5. On this face, I'll enter a value of 4. I accidentally clicked the apply button there. Let's go back to the original texture and see. Okie doke. Here we have the changes applied to a single object. If I press the Z key, I can switch back into object mode, and the object has its multiple texture applications with various sizes. A closer look at the texturing of sub-objects or limbs in DarkBASIC Professional. We have some buttons here that enable us to shift and rotate the texture on the face. By holding down one of the buttons on the X shift, we move the texture to the left or right. By holding one of the buttons on the Y axis, the texture moves up or down. The same is true on up facing or down facing sub-objects. If we go into the object select mode by pressing Z, we can make a duplicate of the object over here and one more over here. 3D World Studio has a feature where we can treat all of the selected faces as one face. To demonstrate this, I'll zoom over here so that we have a good look at the texture, and I'll press the F12 key to expand the view. I'll control click on all of the objects and press X. In fact, I'll select just the faces that are in view. Now if I click one of the justify features, I'll be able to align the texture in the viewport on these three objects as if they were just one, because I have the one face option selected. To demonstrate this, I'll press the fit button. As you can see, the objects have the texture spanning the width of the three selected faces. I then check the one face feature and press the fit button again. We see that the scale and justification has been applied on an individual basis per face. If I press the fit button again with one face, it goes back to how it was before. Now I will demonstrate the other justification features by deleting the excess objects and entering back into sub-object mode, pressing the X key and select the front face. Now I will enter in a different shift setting and I will scale to size 1. In fact, I'll scale to size 2. Now the texture has been applied in a fashion that is off center and does not line up. Obviously we could press the fit button and have it lined up perfectly. However, sometimes this is not desirable. We will sometimes want to have the edge of the object finish somewhere in between the middle of the image. We can use the other justification features to align the texture accordingly. For instance, the left or L button will align the texture to the left edge. The top will align the texture to the top edge. If I enter in another off position shift value, we can also center it to the bottom, or we can center it in the middle. This also applies to a selection of various faces with the one face feature, whereby the texture will be applied to a justification and scale between the multiple objects. We also have the rotation feature, which enables you to rotate the texture. I'll exit the sub-object mode by pressing the Z key, and I'll delete this object and return to the 4 viewports by pressing the F12 key. I will create a new object and we'll take a look at it more closely and drag it. Now, as I drag, in fact I use this view, as I drag the object, you notice that the texture does not drag with the object. Texture stays aligned. The 3D World Studio uses world coordinates for the textures, so the textures are aligned to the world, not to the object. The object is subject to the world, and the textures are subject to the world also. If I hold the mouse down on the texture lock feature, the texture is dragged with the object, thus the texture is subject to the object rather than to the world. This texture lock feature will stay in force when you create new objects. However, generally you want to leave the texture lock feature off, because you're usually working with many different objects and you want the world system to align the textures to each other in a unifying manner. In the next part of this tutorial series, we'll look at the vertex editing features, which enable you to deform the objects and create interesting shapes. Until then, take care.